Chapter 7. Balashi was not amused that Ammon showed up after dark a second time, though he was slightly mollified when he saw the temple guard flanking him to either side. "Have you no concern for the grey hairs you give me with your carelessness?" he asked gruffly. "Please accept my apology for my carelessness," Ammon replied penitently. Balashi was surprised at Ammon's meekness. "Are you ill, my prince?" he asked. "I saw no roll of the eye and heard no sarcasm. Have you contracted another fever?" "I admit I feel flushed, as if I had a fever," Ammon replied. "I passed a most pleasant day today, though a very difficult and confusing one." Balashi scowled. "Was it pleasant, or difficult, or confusing?" he asked. "All three," Ammon replied. "I was conversing with the High Priestess," he said offhandedly, and was gratified when Balashi's eyes opened as wide as platters. "And she told me that I am to help her in her work in the temple." "What manner of work will it be?" Balashi asked suspiciously. "From your attitude the other day, I doubt it will be keeping the temple goats." "I don't actually know yet," Ammon said. "But I hope that I may earn the High Priestess's trust." Ammon hesitated a moment, then asked, "Balashi, am I good-looking?" "At least as attractive as a three-legged dog," Balashi told him. "I'm being serious," Ammon replied. "Compared to other men, would a woman find me desirable?" Balashi set aside the opportunity for mockery and sucked his teeth in consideration. "You are small for your age, and you don't have the physique of a hero," he said. "Yet there is something about you that draws the eye. I suppose on the balance you are comely enough. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Ammon replied too casually. "Be careful, Ammon Shaw," Balashi warned. "The rich and the powerful are not to be trifled with. You may find this High Priestess alluring, but if she mistrusts that you are trying to use her, she will crush you like a cockroach beneath her heel." "First," Ammon said, holding up one finger, "until very recently I was rich and powerful myself, and you had no trouble trusting me. And second," he held up another finger, "why should she mistrust that I am using her when I intend nothing of the sort?" Balashi responded with a snort. "I mean it," Ammon insisted. "If you are so eager to become friends with the High Priestess, I can only conclude that she is as young and as beautiful as the rumors I have heard. The question now is why she's interested in you." "Hey," Ammon objected. "You just finished telling me that you supposed I'm comely enough." "That is true, but those among the powerful who judge only by what their eyes tell them about a person do not remain powerful for long. If this High Priestess has taken an interest in you, especially after such a brief acquaintance, you may be sure that she wants something." "Maybe she just wants a friend." Balashi shook his head. "You're getting too old to be so naive." "Not everyone is as selfish and self-interested as you seem to think," Ammon insisted. "There are good and kind people in the world too, even among the rich." "If so, I have not seen it," Balashi said cynically. "What about me? What about father?" "Your father is dead, and you have neither friends nor money. A kindly man among the powerful is like a silverling among sharks," Balashi stated bluntly. Ammon objected again. "You listen to me, Ammon Shaw," Balashi said seriously. "If you have any regard for yourself at all, do not give your heart to this priestess. You could not have chosen a worse match for yourself if Elil himself had aligned all the stars of the sky against you. They say that she is beautiful, and if this is so, more is the pity. I do not mistrust her motives only because she has shown such interest in you for no good reason, though any sane man would be wary for that reason alone. But in addition to that, she is a priestess, and she belongs to Ishtar. Ishtar is a jealous goddess, and she will not tolerate mortal men meddling with her priestesses." Ammon started to make some flippant comment, but Balashi cut him off. "Even if the ire of the gods is somehow a joke to you, the duties of a priestess of Ishtar will not be. If you give your heart to her, I promise you, by Ar and Elil, that you will see it broken into 1,000 pieces." Ammon set his mouth stubbornly and would not deign to reply. Balashi shook his head. I can see that you will have to break your heart before you learn that I am warning you for your own good. Ammon wouldn't look at him. Balashi sighed. At least swear to me that you won't reveal to her who you are and why you are here. Until you understand where her loyalties lie and what her motives might be, the less she knows about you, the better. I'm not a fool, Ammon replied sullenly. I would never have guessed that from how you're proceeding, Balashi shot back. Ammon tried to shrug off Balashi's warning as he walked to the temple the next morning, but it was not easy. What had he meant exactly about the duties of a priestess of Ishtar? The high priestess did not engage herself in the same manner as the sacred Eridu's of the temple, surely. Impure thoughts about Iltani tried to swarm to the forefront of his mind, but with an effort he pushed them back. What did he think would be the end result of his relationship with her? She would accompany him at the head of an army to retake Eridu, then join him in ruling the city as his queen? It was ridiculous. Any priestess in Eridu who tried to leave the service of Enki would be punished, maybe even killed. He was sure that the rules must be the same in any city of the world. No one would be willing to risk the wrath of his patron god, just so that a priestess could follow her heart and marry the man she loved. That thought brought up an even more painful idea which he must consider. How did Iltani think of him? He had made no secret at all of what he thought of her, but he knew that he was younger than her, and he was small for his age. She probably saw him as nothing more than a younger brother, as all of our conversations surely showed. What had she said to the guards yesterday? See that this boy makes it home safely? No romantic notion of him had crossed her mind at all, he was certain of it. Ammon made himself as miserable as he possibly could with such thoughts during his walk to the temple. Once he arrived, his mood only grew darker. As he passed through the vestibule, he glanced at the wing of the building with the entrance covered by the heavy curtain, and he wondered what Iltani had been doing back there. When he walked past the altar where the priests were slaughtering cattle, Ammon could not help comparing himself to one of the sacrifices. You've looped the rope around your own neck and have led yourself to the altar so that a priestess may cut your throat, he told himself dismally. He sat on the wall surrounding the pool of Inanna and looked desultorily to where Gugalana's eggs awaited, half expecting to see the wall breached and all of the eggs devoured. Fortunately, the wall was intact and the eggs appeared undisturbed. The whole world is not fallen under a cloud just because you happen to be a dull-witted ox, Ammon told himself ruefully. He tried to cheer himself by watching the little sea balls and other creatures for a time, but their antics only struck him as foolish and futile, and he could not find the same joy in them today as he had yesterday. His thoughts grew ever darker as the morning wore on, so that when at last Iltani arrived about the noon hour, she took half a step back when she saw his face. Little brother, your eyes are red and you are as pale as death. Does something ail you? She asked with concern. Ammon tried to smile, but it was an effort to hold it in place. Nothing ails me which is not remedied by seeing your sweet face, dear sister. Iltani sat down. I have many things to tell you, little brother, but if you feel ill, perhaps we should wait until tomorrow, she said. No, I shall be well enough in a few moments, Ammon insisted. Please, tell me what you have to say. Iltani looked dubious, but she went ahead. Last night, as I lay in my bed, Inanna sent me a dream. In my dream, there was a black shadow chasing me through the temple. I ran as fast as I could, but I felt the shadow growing ever closer. I ran into the Hall of Women, and I saw that the Shadu had left their normal places by the door. The Shadu were alive, and they spread their wings as I passed to bar the way of the shadow. I knew that the Shadu would protect me, and I would be safe. Ammon was bemused. Your dreams sound very frightening, he said carefully. I haven't yet told you the most important point, Iltani continued. One of the Shadu turned to look at me, and it had your face. Ammon was inclined to laugh. It is true that I am as strong as a lion and as brave as one too, but I don't recall having fought off any shadows lately, he said lightly. Iltani did not laugh. Clearly, she was taking her dream very seriously. The Shadu are the servants of Inanna. Inanna was telling me that I should trust in you to protect me, she said seriously. For a brief moment, Balashi's warning of the previous night sounded in his mind. Ammon banished it immediately. Truly, dear sister, I will do all within my power to protect you from your enemies, whoever they may be, he promised.
Do you swear it? By Inanna and Enki, do you swear that you will do what you may to protect me?
Iltani asked seriously. Ammon was a bit disturbed that Iltani was so vehement. What did she think that he could do for her? But he had meant what he said. Before An and Enlil, and by Enki and Inanna, I swear that I will do all that I can to protect you. Iltani seemed to breathe easier then.
Little brother, she said, I am glad that Inanna has sent you to me. There is something happening in Uruk. I have tried to convince myself that it is nothing more than a shadow, but I cannot altogether shake the feeling that it is something more deadly.
Tell me about it, Ammon urged.
I will,
Iltani answered.
But first, I must explain how things are to be between you and me.
Ammon felt his heart constrict, and his breath caught in his throat.
Though I am High Priestess, I have no real power, she admitted frankly. There are several older men and women, the members of the council, who run everything at the temple. They hold the real power. They only use me as a pretty window dressing.
That sounds very unpleasant, Ammon admitted. As the Prince of Eridu, he knew very well what it was to be trotted out as a figurehead for ceremonial occasions.
If that were all, I could accept my fate, and even find joy in it. Inanna loves youth and beauty,
she said, with no trace of self-consciousness.
If Inanna created me for no purpose other than to bring her glory, I could find peace in that. The thing that I worry about is the evil that I fear has invaded the heart of the temple here.
I must admit that your youth and beauty bring me great joy, Ammon said playfully.
If Inanna created you just to see if she could achieve perfection of the female form, I would say that her work is done.
Iltani's smile was thin.
I wish this evil that I have detected could be dispelled by your joke, or your guileless flattery, but it is all too real. Already, this force has moved against our most ancient homeland. You have seen it at work in Eridu.
Suddenly, she had his full attention.
What do you mean? He demanded. What has this thing done in Eridu? I will tell you, she promised. But first, I want you to understand the magnitude of this threat.
She paused.
I fear that it seeks to cause chaos and death in all of the cities of the plain, and perhaps even beyond the Empire.
Yes, I'm sure that the threat is grave, Ammon agreed impatiently.
Now tell me...
Iltani held up a hand for patience.
Inanna sent you to aid me because she understands that I have no one else to turn to for help. The men and women of the temple are all under the thumb of the Temple Council, and any who might try to help me would risk expulsion or worse. I am certain that this evil taints the Temple Council, though whether it is a few or all of them, I don't know. I have never been allowed much freedom, but since I have discovered the existence of this plot, I have been more confined than ever. I am allowed no contact with outsiders, for even the briefest of chance encounters are noted, and any conversation beyond a few words is grounds for interrogation by the Council.
Ammon felt his breath catch in his chest. Poor Iltani. She must be infinitely more starved for conversation and companionship than he was, and she did not even have someone like Balashi to turn to and confide in. If what she said was true, even their few conversations here at the pool were a terrible risk. As if she sensed the direction of his thoughts, Iltani continued. I think that they have overlooked my visits with you until now because you seem like no threat. You are young, and anyone who does not know you would think you a mere child, but even so, the Temple Council has taken notice of you. She had attempted to soften it, but Ammon felt her last assertion like a crushing blow. All of his fears from the morning returned to him with full force. Iltani seemed not to notice his reaction. She said, We have played it, brother and sister, and now we must become such an actual fact. I've already told you that I lost my parents at a young age. I never knew my father, and my mother, Ningal, came to the temple for succor when she was left alone by him. Now, for the sake of the council and for the work you were sent by Inanna to help me do, I have invented a father. This father I have created went to Eridu after he left my mother. In Eridu, he fathered a son by another woman, and when he grew old, he harbored a great regret that he had abandoned his wife and infant daughter to fend for themselves in Uruk. By then, he had grown feeble and was about to die. On his deathbed, he charged his son to go to Uruk to discover what had become of his wife and child. The son was to take them back to Eridu, to live out the rest of their days in comfort on his estate, but the unrest in Eridu has made the son's return risky.
Now, the son intends to stay for a while to get to know his sister, and to hope that things will settle out favorably for him in Eridu.
Iltani placed a hand on Ammon's shoulder.
Little brother, will you now truly become my brother in your heart of hearts? Will you swear to help your sister to slip the bonds with which she is bound, and to learn the truth of this evil thing which may threaten us all?
Ammon couldn't help but think that Iltani was being melodramatic. Perhaps the cloistered life she led at the temple encouraged her to see something dangerous and sinister where there was only the normal covetousness and everyday malice of men. Or perhaps it was all a shadow, and there was no threat at all. Even so, Ammon could not help but see a faint ray of sunlight in what was otherwise only a dark and gloomy future for his relationship with Iltani. She spoke of escape from her bonds. Might she not consider a complete escape from her life here in the temple? Ammon took Iltani's 2 hands in his own. In his most solemn voice, he swore, "Iltani en Inanna, I am your brother, Ammon Shor. I will protect you and care for you as best I may all the days of my life. I swear it before An and Enki and Inanna." Ammon felt Iltani's hands tremble.
Ammon Shor, Prince of Eridu?
She asked softly.
Yes,
Ammon answered, gratified that she had recognized his name.
Ammon Shor,
she said again.
The Hidden One, you are well named.
She looked at him then, as if seeing him for the first time.
We must find time to talk, she said. But not now. I must present you to Akala, leader of the council. You cannot be Ammon Shor. Can you think of a family that you can be from? A family that is at least marginally respectable, with a recently dead father and at least 1 son?
Ammon considered. He recalled that old Wardham, a man with several olive orchards out in the countryside, had recently died. Wardham had a reputation as something of a philanderer. Did Wardham have a son? Well, he had many sons, but were any legitimate? And could Ammon pretend to be an olive grower? His main experience with olives had been the one olive tree father had planted near the palace, but it had always given bitter fruit. Ammon found that he could recall 1 or 2 things the palace gardener had told him about olive trees. Together with his recent lesson in the presence of the tax collector, he figured he knew enough to fake it. He remembered now that old Wardham did have a son, and Ammon had even spoken with him on a couple of occasions. He was a little troublemaker named Etana. "I am your brother Etana," Ammon told Iltani. "My father and yours, Wardham, recently passed away. Old Wardham had a reputation for seeking new fields for his plough, but he regretted his lustful ways at the end of his life." "Etana and Iltani," the priestess said. "The names sound well together. I like them. Now, you must convince Akala to allow you to have lunch with me each day. She will be reluctant. You must use your silver tongue to ensure that she goes along with it willingly." "Leave it to me," Ammon said breezily. The House of Women seemed more like an administrative center than a house. There were women and men bustling about everywhere, and there were several large offices on the main floor, with nooks for tablets, storage boxes for clay, cut reeds, and tables for rolling out writing tablets. Iltani led him to one of these offices, where a wizened old woman with snow-white hair presided over everything. Rather than a simple white tunic or dress, which seemed ubiquitous throughout the temple, Akala wore a dress dyed a very expensive crimson. She had jeweled rings on each of her fingers, and wore a necklace and matching headdress glittering with gold. All of the gaudy splendor gave Ammon an idea. "Your Grace," Iltani said. "Here is the brother I told you about, recently arrived from Eridu. His name is Etana." Akala smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Ah, Eridu," she said. "Home of the first men. Welcome to Uruk, young Etana." Ammon bowed. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Your Grace," he said. "I had heard that Uruk was a place of great style and opulence, but until now I had not seen those 2 qualities combined in such a dazzling fashion." Akala betrayed no hint whether or not Ammon's flattery had hit its mark. "I have ever been a great admirer of the king's palace on the bluffs in the east of Eridu," she said. "The views that the king must have. And the apple orchards surrounding the palace grounds. Oh, such a sweet smell they produce." So, Akala was suspicious of either Iltani, or Ammon, or both. It was a good thing that Ammon really was from Eridu. A great person such as yourself must travel widely, Ammon suggested. Perhaps your grace is thinking of Ur or Lagash or some other place, for the king's palace in Eridu is in the south, and there are no apple orchards nearby, nor orchards of any kind on the palace grounds, though I believe there are a few fruit trees here and there in the garden.
Oh yes, sometimes my old brain gets confused, Akala replied. But tell me, Etana, what does your father do for a living?
My father's lands have a modest olive orchard, from which we sell the fruit and press the oil, Ammon replied smoothly. But alas, my father himself has recently left this life. He was old and sickly, and it was a mercy for him to go.
And you now have inherited the lands and orchards?
Akala asked. I have, Ammon answered.
And yet these lands and orchards are not enough for you. You have come to Uruk with the intention of stealing Iltani away from us as well,
Akala accused. Not at all, not at all, Ammon answered. I admit that my father charged me to bring his wife and my sister back to Eridu, but he could not have guessed that Iltani and Inanna has prospered so spectacularly in Uruk. I am sure that my sister would not leave her position as High Priestess of the Temple of Inanna for anything, but I can only hope that she will condescend to allow me to share a few meals with her, so that I may get to know her and that she may get to know me, before I must return to my orchards in Eridu.
And how long do you intend to remain in Uruk?
Akala asked suspiciously. Sadly, I cannot say for sure. If I had my way, I would leave 3 days hence, but alas, there is great unrest in Eridu. There is a new king, and not all of the great families are content with his ascension. There has been fighting and intrigue and not a few murders. I left my steward in charge of my affairs, with strict orders for him to send for me once matters are more settled.
And with all of this unrest, you came from Eridu to Uruk alone?
Akala pressed. Alone, save for a faithful family retainer who has served my father for many years, Ammon answered.
How do you know that Iltani is your sister, if you never before have laid eyes upon her and you do not know her mother?
Akala asked, changing tactics abruptly. When my father felt his life slipping away, he called me to his side. There had always been a shadow in his past which he refused to speak about, but I had never guessed what it might be. Shortly before he died, he told me that he had once had a wife in Uruk, and that he had shamefully abandoned her after she had borne him a daughter. He had always wanted a son, and he spurned his wife when she did not produce one for him. He said this thing which he had done had always caused him great pain, but he had neglected to make things right. He charged me with his dying breath to seek out Ningal, who had been his wife, and his daughter Iltani. He said to seek them in the Temple of Inanna, though I don't know if he knew for sure that they would be here, or if it was only a starting place which he suggested.
Iltani is a common enough name, and I have known dozens of Ningals,
Akala objected.
How do you know that this girl is your sister?
She has the look of my family, for one. She is the very image of my cousin Nanshi, and my father said to seek her at the temple. Akala looked skeptical, so he added, When I came to Uruk, I would never have guessed that Inanna would prosper my path and ease my search as she has done, for I had not been in Uruk many days, and yet here is Iltani, my sister. Apparently, this last flourish had been the wrong thing to say, for Akala narrowed her eyes.
How very convenient that you came straight to Iltani, she said.
Ammon decided that backtracking now would only make the old bat more suspicious, so he tried the opposite tack. Convenient does not begin to describe it. I would say that it was absolutely providential. When I came to the temple with my retainer, he began by making discreet inquiries, due to the delicate nature of the situation. But as soon as I entered the temple, I felt some force take hold of me and draw me to the pool of Inanna, here in your courtyard. I don't know if it was Inanna who guided my steps, or if it was Enki whose power resides in pure water. That it was one of the gods, I am certain, for as soon as I laid my eyes upon Iltani, I knew that she must be my sister. Akala replied with skepticism.
Setting cousins aside, the two of you look nothing alike.
My mother was very light of skin and eyes, which may be why your grace cannot see the resemblance, but my sister has the very same nose as I do, and her ears are as alike to mine as 2 peas in a pod, Ammon improvised. Akala looked from one to the other, trying to judge the validity of the claim.
There is a certain similarity about the ears, I will grant you that,
Akala said at last. Ammon knew that irrelevant details could sometimes be the best way to make a lie convincing, so he invented one on the spot and found that he was unable to resist a small tweaking of Iltani's beautiful nose, or rather, ears. In another 10 or 20 years there will be no doubt in your mind, for the ears of all the members of my father's family grow very hairy as we age, so that by the time we're old we have more hair on our ears than on our heads. If you'll look closely at Iltani's ears, I have no doubt that you will see the process beginning already." Akala stepped closer to Iltani and looked at her ears.
"It's true,"
she cackled.
"Though the hairs are small, they're as dense as the hairs on a dog's back, and I am sure that they are much longer than they were when she was smaller."
"It is a curse in my family that we do not age well," Ammon said. "My father was not so very old, but he was quite sickly. And, sadly for him, it was not his ears that were the worst part of the bargain that the gods gave to him."
"Is that so?"
asked Akala. "Unfortunately it is," Ammon affirmed.
"My family is just the opposite,"
Akala crowed.
"We live on and on with bodies that remain nearly as robust as when we were in our 20s.
"Truly?" Ammon asked, allowing a note of wistfulness to enter his voice.
"See for yourself,"
Akala insisted.
"How many years would you say that I have lived to see?"
Ammon rubbed his chin, as if considering. To himself, he thought about 9,000 years, but he didn't say it. Then he decided upon a bit more flattery. "Truly, Your Grace, I could not say. That you are a woman of wisdom and experience is clear, but there is a certain timelessness about your features, so that you might be 40, or you might be one of the line of the first men, whom they say lived for more than 1,000 years.
"Ha!"
the old woman cackled.
"You heard him, Iltani. He says 40. Young man, I have seen 67 winters,"
she exulted.
"Truly,"
Ammon said in wonder. "Inanna herself must have blessed you for you to remain as young and healthy as you seem."
"Iltani,"
said Akala.
"your brother must dine with us tomorrow. See to the preparations."
The old woman turned back to Ammon.
"Bring your retainer with you as well. I absolutely insist."
Ammon said nothing, choosing instead to make a polite bow. He hoped that Balashi would be able to shake free of his guard duties somehow. Perhaps being invited to the temple to dine was a prestigious enough event that his lord would understand.